Between 1,948 and the mid-1,950 seconds, the skies above America became a theater of the impossible. Project Blue Book investigators found themselves overwhelmed by encounters that defied explanation: radar tracking unknown objects, photographs of craft that shouldn't exist, pilots vanishing into thin air, and mysterious lights dancing over the nation's capital. These weren't just stories whispered in the dark. They were documented, investigated, and filed away in the most extensive UFO research project ever undertaken by the United States Air Force. What truths lie hidden in these declassified files? Tonight, we journey through 15 of the most compelling cases that continue to haunt researchers to this day. The night over Fargo, North Dakota, seemed ordinary enough. Lieutenant George Gorman, a seasoned World War II pilot with over 2,000 hours of flight time, was returning from a routine training flight in his F-51 Mustang. The 25-year-old Air National Guard pilot had requested clearance to practice nighttime instrument flying, a decision that would lead him into one of the earliest and most extraordinary aerial confrontations ever recorded. At 9 p.m., cruising at 5,000 feet, Gorman's routine shattered. A bright point of light streaked across his canopy, moving with impossible speed and precision. The control tower confirmed a Piper Cub was below him, preparing to land. But this light was something else entirely, something that would challenge everything Gorman knew about aviation. What happened next was nothing short of an aerial duel. For 27 harrowing minutes, Gorman chased the object through the night sky. The light wasn't just evading him, it was anticipating his every move. Each time he closed distance, the object darted ahead. On 2 terrifying occasions, it made head-on runs at his Mustang, forcing him to dive away in alarm. The object climbed vertically at speeds his fighter couldn't match, reversed course in impossibly tight turns, and seemed to toy with him like a cat playing with prey. From the ground, air traffic controllers watched the deadly dance unfold. Dr. Cannon and his student, still on the tarmac with their Piper Cub, witnessed the light maneuvering at speeds and angles no known aircraft could achieve. The consistency of their testimony eliminated any suggestion that Gorman was experiencing this alone. The pursuit ended only when Gorman's fuel ran critically low. As he turned back toward the airfield, the mysterious light shot upward and vanished into the darkness. Landing pale and visibly shaken, Gorman filed a report that would send shockwaves through military intelligence. I am convinced there was thought behind its maneuvers. I'm also convinced it was governed by the laws of inertia because its acceleration was rapid but not immediate, and it could not turn at right angles at this speed. The Air Force's explanation? A weather balloon illuminated by city lights. But no balloon could execute sudden climbs, sharp turns, or aggressive head-on passes. No balloon could sustain a prolonged, responsive engagement lasting nearly half an hour. Gorman, a combat veteran familiar with every aerial phenomenon, rejected the explanation outright. To his dying day, he insisted the object had been mechanical, directed, and intelligent. The Gorman Dogfight became one of the big 3, 1,948 incidents that convinced investigators something unprecedented was penetrating American airspace. It was included in the classified Estimate of the Situation, a top-secret report that concluded UFOs were most likely interplanetary craft. That document was later ordered destroyed, but its existence revealed how seriously cases like Gorman's were taken at the highest levels of military intelligence. Just before 3 a.m., Eastern Airlines Flight 576 cut through the darkness at 5,000 feet, carrying 20 sleeping passengers from Houston to Atlanta. At the controls sat Captain Clarence Chiles and co-pilot John Whitted, both decorated World War II veterans with thousands of flight hours between them. The night was clear, visibility excellent, and nothing suggested their flight would become one of the most famous UFO cases ever recorded. At 2:45 a.m., approaching Montgomery, Alabama, Chiles spotted a piercing light off the right side of the aircraft. Assuming it was another plane on an intersecting course, he alerted Whitted. But as the light closed in, both men realized they were witnessing something beyond comprehension. Racing directly toward them was an enormous cigar-shaped craft at least 100 feet long, twice the diameter of a B-29 bomber's fuselage. It appeared metallic, reflecting light from its own intense glow. Along its side, both pilots saw a row of rectangular windows lit from within by a soft bluish-white glow. Through those windows, Chiles thought he glimpsed silhouettes, dark shapes moving as though inside the craft. At the rear, a brilliant orange-red exhaust extended several times the length of the craft's body, pulsing like a rocket engine. The craft hurtled toward them at terrifying speed. In an instant, the pilots braced for impact. At the last possible moment, the object pulled up in a sharp climb, banking slightly to the right. The DC-3 rocked in its wake, disturbed by turbulence. The craft roared past their right wing and shot upward into the darkness, disappearing into a broken layer of cloud with a burst of acceleration. The entire encounter lasted no more than 10 to 15 seconds. Yet both men agreed they had seen a structured, solid craft unlike anything in human aviation. One passenger near a window corroborated seeing a bright streak of light outside. Upon landing, they immediately filed detailed reports with Air Force officials. The sighting became a cornerstone case in the drafting of the famous Estimate of the Situation. Though the estimate was later rejected and ordered destroyed, the fact that it existed at all revealed how seriously cases like Chiles-Whitted were taken. The official explanation, a meteor satisfied few. Meteors don't feature rows of illuminated windows, nor do they pull up in sharp climbs to avoid collision. On a cold afternoon over Kentucky, the skies bore witness to one of the most tragic encounters in UFO history. At 1:15 p.m., the control tower at Godman Army Airfield near Fort Knox received reports of a large, bright object hovering high in the sky. Within minutes, phones rang with reports from Kentucky State Police and civilians describing the same thing, a huge, gleaming disk or sphere hanging above the horizon. 4 F-51 Mustangs of the Kentucky Air National Guard were returning from a routine flight when control radioed Captain Thomas Mantell with orders to investigate. What began as an intercept order spiraled into tragedy. As Mantell climbed toward the object, he radioed the tower. The object was tremendous in size, metallic, and reflecting sunlight. His wingmen, lacking oxygen equipment, dropped out of the pursuit. Mantell pressed on alone. Observers on the ground watched through binoculars as the F-51 climbed higher, pursuing the brilliant object. Mantell's final transmissions described something resembling a large disk, metallic and glowing. Then, silence. At 3:18 p.m., his aircraft entered a steep spiral and crashed in a field near Franklin, Kentucky, killing him instantly. The bright object continued its silent presence before finally disappearing. News of Mantell's death spread rapidly. A pilot had been killed chasing an unidentified flying object, the first widely reported UFO-related death in American history. The Air Force's initial explanation that Mantell had been chasing the planet Venus was quickly dismissed by astronomers. Later, investigators suggested a skyhook balloon. But even this explanation left glaring holes. No balloon launches were confirmed in Kentucky that day. Mantell himself had described a massive metallic craft, not a balloon. For Project Sign, Mantell's death became a watershed moment. Along with Chiles-Whitted and Gorman, it formed part of the cases that drove analysts to conclude UFOs might be interplanetary craft. Officially, The case was attributed to misidentification. Unofficially, it remained one of the most troubling events in Air Force history, a reminder that the pursuit of the unknown sometimes carries the ultimate price. The hot Texas summer night of the 25th of August, 1951, transformed the quiet college town of Lubbock into the epicenter of one of the most widely witnessed UFO events in history. What began as a casual evening among colleagues evolved into a wave of sightings that would span several weeks and produce some of the most famous photographs ever taken of unidentified aerial phenomena. Just after 9 p.m., 3 Texas Tech professors, Dr. W. I. Robinson, head of geology, Dr. Oberg of chemical engineering, and Dr. W. L. Ducker of petroleum engineering sat in a backyard discussing their work. Suddenly, their conversation stopped. A V-shaped formation of glowing bluish-green lights swept silently overhead, moving quickly but in perfect alignment. Before they could process what they'd seen, another formation appeared, following the same trajectory in complete silence. These were not meteors. Meteors streaked briefly and randomly. These were not aircraft. The lights emitted no sound and moved far faster than conventional planes. The professors, trained to catalog natural phenomena, immediately ruled out mundane explanations. Over the next several nights, the lights reappeared. Students, townspeople, farmers, dozens reported the same phenomenon. Groups of 15 to 30 luminous objects moving in V-shaped formations, gliding rapidly across the sky in silence. Then came the photographs. Freshman student Carl Hart Jr. set up his camera after hearing of the professor's sightings. On August 30th, he captured 5 exposures showing a curved string of glowing lights arranged in a distinct arc against the night sky. When published in Life magazine, Hart's photos catapulted the story into national prominence. Project Blue Book investigators examined the photographs exhaustively, finding no evidence of tampering. The professors vouched for Hart's honesty. The Air Force concluded the photos were authentic but struggled to provide a satisfying explanation. The official theory, reflections of city lights on the undersides of migrating plovers, was dismissed by the professors. They argued the lights were too bright, too distinct, and moved with precision no flock of birds could replicate. The Lubbock Lights became a classic wave case. Sightings repeated over weeks involving multiple categories of witnesses. The consistency of reports, paired with Hart's photographs, placed the case among the most significant in the Blue Book archive. More than 70 years later, the images remain iconic. The explanations remain inadequate, and the mystery endures. On a quiet morning at Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, home to the U.S. Army Signal Corps and Center for Advanced Radar Research Operations, were disrupted by a sequence of events that reached the Pentagon within hours. Radar operators at Evans Signal Laboratory began picking up blips that behaved unlike any conventional aircraft. These targets appeared suddenly, moved at extraordinary speeds, then vanished only to reappear elsewhere. Visual observers reported fast-moving metallic objects darting across the sky. The combination of radar and visual reports elevated the incident from curiosity to potential national security concern. The following day, 2 Air Force pilots flying a T-33 jet trainer reported a direct encounter near Sandy Hook. They saw a bright metallic object glinting in the sky and gave chase. As they closed in, the object accelerated rapidly and climbed beyond their reach, disappearing in seconds. Colonel Edward Ruppelt later recalled that the Fort Monmouth incident caused near panic at Air Force Intelligence Headquarters. Generals demanded immediate explanations. Some, fearing Soviet aircraft with superior technology had penetrated American airspace. Project Grudge dispatched investigators who found consistent testimonies, multiple radar returns, visual sightings of silvery objects, and an intercept attempt that failed. The radar logs showed targets moving at speeds from 700 to 1,200 miles per hour, well above standard jets in 1951. The objects demonstrated controlled maneuvers, including sudden climbs and sharp turns, suggesting intelligent guidance. The Air Force's explanation, anomalous radar propagation, failed to account for simultaneous visual sightings and pilot reports. Behind closed doors, the case shook confidence and demonstrated that UFO reports weren't merely civilian curiosities but could involve military radar, trained observers, and pilots converging on the same unexplained reality. On a quiet Oregon farm, Paul and Evelyn Trent's routine evening became one of UFO history's most enduring cases. Evelyn first noticed a metallic disc-shaped object hanging in the western sky, tilted slightly and reflecting the fading light. She called for Paul, who grabbed his Kodak camera and snapped 2 photographs as the object hovered, then climbed higher before moving off. The photographs showed a classic saucer-shaped craft with metallic gleam and no visible means of propulsion. Unlike blurry or ambiguous images, the Trent photographs were sharp, clear, and unmistakably structured. The Trents themselves seemed uninterested in sensationalizing their capture. They told neighbors casually, waiting weeks before showing the photographs to a local newspaper. Project Blue Book analysts examined the photographs extensively, searching for signs of trickery, suspended models, double exposure, reflections. None were found. The angles of light, shadows, and the object's proportions all indicated something distant and large. Even the Condon Committee's later analysis, including computer enhancement and photometric studies, supported the idea that the object was a large, distant craft rather than a small hoax. For 70 years, the McMinnville photographs have remained among the most famous UFO images ever taken. They resist debunking, challenge explanation, and stand as silent testimony to a moment when the extraordinary intruded on the ordinary, when 2 farmers looked to the sky and caught on film what generations since have argued over but never definitively explained. In July 1952, the heart of American power was shaken by events that became known as the Washington Flap. For 2 consecutive weekends, unidentified flying objects appeared over the nation's capital, tracked simultaneously on radar and observed visually by pilots, radar operators, and civilians. The incidents forced the U.S. press, Air Force into its largest public confrontation with the UFO mystery during the Project Blue Book years. It began late on July 19 when radar controllers at Washington National Airport noticed unusual returns on their scopes. At first, a few odd blips suggested slow-moving aircraft where none should have been. Within minutes, the screen filled with a cluster of targets moving at inconsistent speeds, sometimes hovering, then accelerating to over 600 miles per hour. Controllers contacted Andrews Air Force Base, where operators confirmed seeing the same unknown blips over the capital region. As radar tracked the objects, ground observers reported strange lights in the sky. Pilots spotted bright, maneuvering lights darting above the city, from the White House and Capitol grounds. Citizens looked up to see luminous objects hovering silently, defying air regulations that tightly controlled D.C. airspace. To have anything, let alone unidentified craft, above the seat of government was deeply alarming. The following weekend, July 26 to 27, the phenomenon returned with greater intensity. This time, the Air Force scrambled jets to intercept. Fighter pilots raced into the night skies, vectored toward the radar returns. Yet when the jets arrived, the objects vanished from screens. When fighters returned to base, the blips reappeared as though the unknowns were aware of intercept attempts. One pilot reported chasing a bright light that outpaced his jet with ease before disappearing. Headlines declared, "Saucers swarm over Capitol and radar spots flying discs over Washington." Never before had UFOs been reported so dramatically over such a sensitive location with radar confirmation. The public demanded answers. Politicians received frantic calls. Some feared Soviet incursion. Others speculated about extraterrestrial visitors. To calm the public, the Air Force held the largest press conference since World War II on July 29. Major General John Samford admitted there were credible, unexplainable incidents, but reassured the nation that UFOs posed no threat. The radar returns, he suggested, were caused by temperature inversions, warm air layers bending radar beams to create false targets. Many were unconvinced. Radar operators insisted they knew the difference between false echoes and solid targets. Simultaneous visual sightings from ground and air reinforced their conviction. Even within the Air Force, some intelligence officers privately admitted the official explanation didn't fully account for the events. The Washington flap marked the peak of 1,950 seconds public interest in UFOs. It forced the Air Force to confront its credibility problem. The public was no longer content with vague dismissals. In the aftermath, the CIA quietly convened the Robertson Panel in 1953, recommending UFO reports be systematically downplayed to reduce public hysteria. From then on, official stance shifted from investigation to managing perception. Today, the Washington flap remains one of the most dramatic episodes in UFO history, combining radar data, visual sightings, and attempted interceptions in the skies over the nation's capital, leaving behind no easy explanation. Chief Warrant Officer Delbert Newhouse of the U.S. Navy was traveling cross-country with his family near Tremonton, Utah, when his wife noticed a cluster of strange objects in the sky. Pulling out his 16mm Bell & Howell movie camera, Newhouse captured several minutes of footage showing a group of circular objects maneuvering silently at high altitude. Through his lens, he recorded objects that appeared to break away from the main formation, darting back and forth before rejoining the group. Some seemed to tilt, catching sunlight in flashes of metallic brilliance. Newhouse, experienced in aerial reconnaissance, knew immediately he was seeing something unusual. No wings, no tails, no visible propulsion. The footage offered nearly 1,200 frames of motion picture evidence, clear, consistent, and detailed enough for frame-by-frame study. Navy experts at the Naval Photographic Interpretation Center found no evidence of wings, flapping, or random drift. The objects appeared structured, circular, and self-propelled. Their speed and maneuverability ruled out balloons. Their consistency argued against birds. Project Blue Book acknowledged the film's authenticity, but leaned toward the bird hypothesis, suggesting seagulls gliding in sunlight could create the illusion of metallic discs. Even their own experts admitted the Tremonton film was one of the clearest and most puzzling UFO recordings ever received. The Condon Committee later acknowledged the film's authenticity while admitting the evidence was ambiguous. For Newhouse, the experience was transformative. A career Navy man, disciplined and cautious, he maintained throughout his life that what he filmed was real and unexplainable. His sincerity and reputation added weight to the case, making it difficult for skeptics to dismiss. More than 70 years later, digital analysis continues to support the conclusion that the objects were solid, is structured, and in formation, not birds or balloons, leaving the Tremonton film as one of the most remarkable visual records of the UFO phenomenon. On the night of the 2nd of November 1957, the flat roads around Loveland, Texas, became the site of one of the most remarkable UFO encounters ever documented, an event where multiple vehicles experienced electromagnetic effects in the presence of a glowing object. The first report came from Pedro Saucedo, a farm worker driving along Highway 116 just outside Levelland around 11 p.m. Saucedo saw a flash of light streaking across the sky before a massive glowing object descended toward the road. He described it as torpedo-shaped, about 200 feet long, glowing bright blue. As it approached, his truck's engine sputtered and died, and headlights cut out. The two men jumped from the vehicle in fear as the object roared overhead with a rush of wind and heat, then disappeared. As soon as it was gone, the truck started again. Less than an hour later, another motorist experienced an identical event at nearly the same spot. Over the next 2 hours, Laveland Police Station received at least 15 separate calls from drivers describing the same phenomenon: engines stalling, lights failing, and a glowing object hovering above the highway. Sheriff Weir Clem, initially skeptical, investigated personally and saw a flash of light cross the sky, feeling his engine falter. The physical effect on vehicles gave the case unusual weight. Cars stalled only when the object was present and started again as soon as it departed. Within 48 hours, the U.S. Postava Air Force sent Project Blue Book officials to Leveland. Their swift conclusion: the sightings were caused by an electrical storm and ball lightning, satisfied few. There had been no storms that night, and ball lightning rarely lasts more than seconds, let alone long enough to stall multiple cars across miles of roadway. The Leveland case became one of the most famous UFO incidents of the 1,950 seconds, cited as among the strongest examples of unexplained aerial activity because of its physical impact on machines. For residents, the memory endured vividly, the glow turning the highway bright as midday, the silence after engines died, the vulnerability of being stranded in darkness with something unknown hovering above. On a cold night over Lake Superior, the darkness carried one of the most haunting mysteries in Project Blue Book history: the disappearance of an Air Force jet and its crew during an attempted UFO intercept. At approximately 1 a.m., radar operators at Kinross Air Force Base detected an unidentified target approaching from Canadian airspace. To identify it, an F-89 Sea Scorpion interceptor was scrambled, piloted by First Lieutenant Felix Moncla, with Second Lieutenant Robert Wilson as radar operator. Ground radar tracked both the interceptor and the unidentified target as controllers radioed vectors, guiding Moncla closer. Communication was routine at first. Moncla acknowledged instructions. Wilson relayed radar information. The two blips on the ground scope closed distance. Then, in an instant, something extraordinary occurred. Radar operators watched in shock as the two blips appeared to merge. Seconds later, only one blip remained: the unknown. The F-89 was gone. Controllers tried frantically to raise Moncla and Wilson by radio. There was no response. Within minutes, the remaining target faded from the screen. Search and rescue operations began immediately, scouring the vast expanse of Lake Superior. Nothing was found: not a wing, not a seat cushion, not a single trace of Moncla or Wilson. To this day, no confirmed wreckage has ever been recovered. The Air Force's shifting explanations: collision with a Canadian transport, denied by Canada. Vertigo, causing a crash, failed to explain the merged radar returns or total absence of debris. Project Blue Book's final entry simply labeled it unidentified. For UFO researchers, the Kinross disappearance became one of the most compelling cases in history, a real-time intercept recorded on radar, followed by the sudden loss of both jet and crew. The image of two radar blips merging and the interceptor vanishing suggested something more than mechanical failure. From 1952 to 1969, Project Blue Book investigated over 12,000 UFO reports. Of these, 701 remain officially unidentified cases where trained investigators could find no conventional explanation. These 15 cases represent the core of that enduring mystery: the Gorman Dogfight, where a pilot engaged in aerial combat with an intelligent object. Chiles-Whitted, where airline pilots witnessed a structured craft with windows at close range. Mantell, where a hero died pursuing the unknown. The Lubbock Lights, captured on film by dozens of witnesses. Fort Monmouth, where radar and visual confirmation converged. McMinnville, producing photographs that resist debunking. Washington, D.C., where the nation's capital was invaded. Tremonton, offering clear motion picture evidence. Leveland, demonstrating physical effects on vehicles. And Kinross, where 2 airmen vanished forever. These cases share common threads: credible witnesses, multiple forms of confirmation, physical evidence, and official investigations that struggled to explain them. They remind us that the skies above remain a frontier of mystery that, despite our technology, our science, and our certainty, there are moments when the unknown reveals itself, challenges our understanding, and vanishes back into darkness, leaving only questions behind. As you drift off to sleep tonight, consider the pilots, radar operators, farmers, and families who looked up and saw something that changed them forever. Consider the files locked away, the testimonies preserved, and the mysteries that endure. The truth, as they say, is out there. And sometimes, it comes looking for us.